Okay, getting involved in some gel coat repair, not to the top sides of the hull, which is actually in very good condition. Probably just needs a little bit of polishing. The transom I did do at an earlier date. And here on the transom, there was a hole here for the rudder quadrant that came out for the pedestal that I removed. I did close the hole, gel coated it. Also, I had to repair the rudder where the quadrant attached and gel coat that. And that's been completed and it looks really good. So the rest of the gel coat repair that I'll be focusing on will be on deck. Starting with the cockpit area. So needing to look past all of the dirt and filth that's here from, crawling around during the refit. There's one area here that I bought when I bought the boat. There was a considerable amount of gel coat damage from, I guess a line must have been hanging here and it flogged a big area there, taking off all the gel coat, and I just put some temporary paint on there. Also, when I removed the pedestal, there's some areas where I kind of just applied the gel coat temporarily till I could do a proper repair. Here's another spot here and there. And a few smaller areas. Here are the lazarettes. One of these lids were actually out of alignment and I aligned it. But now it's kind of contacting the sides and some of the gel coat's cracking. And also the cockpit sole is all chipped up just from being handled and removed. And after a little bit of light cleaning, I can actually see through the dirt. And before I get started, so in the past I've used this West Marine gel coat repair kit. I've had mixed success with that. They give you a clear paste and then you're supposed to tint it with these pigments. But I've since moved to this one from Total Boat, which actually comes white. I'm using the one with wax. It's said that if you use the one without wax, you're supposed to cover it with Mylar. But I found it helpful to cover this one with Mylar also, which I have here. I just cut up some sheet protectors, and that kind of saves you a lot of sanding and a lot of recoating, because when you brush this on, it tends to just leave brush strokes no matter how hard you try, no matter how many coats, you always get brush strokes, and you end up having to do a lot of sanding, and oftentimes you'll just sand right through. And I've already started sanding down some of those areas that I'm going to be working on here. Also, I accidentally cut into there. So yes, it would be much easier to just paint, and touching up scratch paint is also easier. But if you can gel coat, this really opens up a lot of possibilities. I mean, gel coat is so much more durable than paint, and you can polish it, you can scratch it, and then just sand it back. But the drawbacks are that it takes a little bit of time to learn, some trial and error, but it's really not that difficult. And to get started, I'm matching the color. So this is brown pigment. I got this one from the West Marine kit. I just touched a screwdriver to it and just put the smallest amount in here. Barely just touched it. And I'm going to use that to start with to see how far I get as far as color match. Hard to tell on camera, but that looks pretty close. So just need to put in the proper amount of catalyst and apply it with a brush. And now here I've applied it to that area. Not super smooth, but we'll see. I put that Mylar over it after brushing it on. Color looks good. Not sure if that shows up on video, but let's see how this goes. And just like that, I've got it in a few various places. You can see the Mylar sticking up there and here, a couple places there. And now I've peeled off the plastic or Mylar or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, color looks good, but this one's a little rough. There must have been some bubbles in here. I'm going to sand that down and see how that goes. And now skipping ahead to several coats later. I think I put on about a total of maybe four or five coats. And I had to use a couple of different application methods. So I started out with that plastic sheet or Mylar, and it worked okay. It didn't really, it came out rough because it never fully cured because of the temperature. So I went back to brushing it on with a regular brush. I also used a foam brush, is a better quality. Problem with these is you can only use them for a few minutes before the solvents start to attack the foam and they soften. But the brush actually is really the key, I think. After I brush it on, I'll take another brush, a clean brush, and feather it out, kind of like rolling and tipping a paint job. Once you feather it with the tip of a brush, it actually takes out a lot of those streaks from brushing it on, and you're able to feather out the edges a lot better too. So that came out good. I think that's done. I only had to do a very, very light sanding. Another type of gel coat repair that I'm doing are cracks or spider cracks. Typically found at stanchion bases and the bases of grab rails, things like that, where there would be stress. So generally I usually just sand them down, but in some instances I'll use a little attachment like this on a Dremel or a drill and clean out the crack, like I started doing here, and then mix up some gel coat. And now after I've applied the gel coat, looks a little light, but that all came out really well. So all of the other places are complete. I finished down there. I also did around the removable cockpit sole because that was all chipped up. And also in there, you can see it's a little lighter where there's some dirt here. There was a bit of gel coat damage in there. And also up forward, that forward section of the port side bulwark had quite a bit of cracks, and I sanded it down to the fiberglass, and that came out pretty good. And also around these bases for the grab rails, I did those, and the bases of the pulpit and some of the other stanchion bases. But I'm pretty happy with the way this came out, and I think I'm going to call this complete. And the final part to this gel coating, there's a rectangular recessed area there, back there, which looks like it's shipped gel coat, but that's actually the remains of glue from the hull identification number plate that these boats came with originally. Mine is long gone. They came in either bronze or aluminum. So I studied the ones that I could find and just had one made up. And I'm going to glue that in there. And now that looks complete. And a few final notes for posterity. I found that the hardest part of gel coating is really getting the color matched properly. In my case, I've only had to use the brown pigment, although I'm sure there are some cases where a different color pigment would be a better choice. But getting that color just right is really kind of critical. I tend to go a little bit lighter on purpose because you'll notice there's a little bit of discoloration here. And when I go in to clean that, I clean after rather than before. The staining and the dirt, which is kind of mixed in there, if I'm using bleach or Barkeeper's Friend, oxalic acid, that staining will get carried over to the new gel coat somewhat, so I'll get a more homogeneous and consistent color. Also, another note is adding the catalyst. The catalyst is very watery compared to the gel coat itself, and it requires a lot of mixing, especially if it's not that warm out. And one of the biggest mistakes I think people will make, including myself, when I first started doing this, is that not mixing enough, you'll tend to get uncured patches in whatever you're gel coating, and then you pretty much have to start over, and it makes a mess. Another note is temperature. Again, it has been relatively cold up until recently. I've had some cold days and cold nights, and yet I was still able to get a cure just by letting it sit for a long time. Leaving that Mylar on there, or that plastic sheet, if it's not warm enough, when you peel it off, you'll get what looks like bubbles, but it's actually because it's not fully cured. So leaving that on for an extra day, if I do go that way, is necessary. Also, peeling that off, once you peel that off, because this is the waxed type of gel coat, that also needs to sit a while longer once that sheet is off, because it's still evaporating solvents. Also, application. So I like to use the plastic sheet when I can, because you get a very flat surface. The foam brush is very good, although you have to change out the brush pretty often, because they only last a couple of minutes before melting. But if you use a foam brush and you do several coats, that actually comes out pretty good. But the problem with the foam brush is you have a lot less control than you would with a regular bristle brush. With the bristle brush, you get a lot of brush strokes, brush marks from the bristles themselves. But going in, like I mentioned before, and just doing a tipping with the tip of the brush, kind of like rolling and tipping, you get out most of those brush strokes, those bristle marks, and you're able to feather out the edges much better. So that's kind of my preferred technique. Also, if the consistency of the gel coat is too thin, it can be thickened up with some colloidal silica, which I started to do here, but ended up not using that because just the temperature made it thick enough to work with. Where I could have used block sanding, but that wasn't always possible, so I just used a piece of sandpaper in my hand. So that's pretty much it. I think I'm pretty much done. I'm just going to give the boat a good cleaning, but not until I do some other jobs that are going to make an even bigger mess. And I thought I'd end this video with a fun little addition. When I had that hull identification number plate made that I mounted behind the pulpit, I had another plaque made. This little blemish here has bothered me. When I built the galley, I reclaimed a lot of the teak from the existing galley, and I over sanded here, so that's kind of been there, and it's annoying. And with all this this teak and brass theme that I have going on here, I decided to have something made in that package. And that is this custom brass plaque with the boat's name and hull number. And boy, that looks beautiful.